In this video, I will be explaining all of the mechanics behind how cover works in COH3, teach you the differences between the three cover types that are available, provide information on which weapon types perform the best and worst against cover, and teach you a bunch of micro tricks so you can use and counter cover like a pro. And we begin with the basics of cover. Infantry can be positioned in cover to get defensive bonuses. This includes squads and the models that crew team weapons. When a unit is in cover, they have a shield on their decorator. A yellow shield means they are in light cover. A green shield means heavy cover. Garrison cover, which units get from being inside an ambient building or constructed defenses like a bunker or fighting pit, behaves a bit differently, and we will look at that separately later on. Hovering my mouse shows the light cover that is available in this crater. When I move a squad over this area and stop when just one model is in cover, no shield appears. But once a second model enters the crater, now the shield appears. This demonstrates that you need half or more of the models from a squad to be in cover for the shield to appear on their decorator. But the shield appearing does not mean cover is protecting every model in the squad. The two models outside the crater are not being protected, so if the enemy attacked from this direction, the out of cover models would likely be shot at first and die quickly. Some objects are too small to offer enough cover positions to protect a whole squad, especially for high model count units, so pay attention to the number of green or yellow dots that appear. Most cover is directional, meaning it needs to be between your unit and the source of damage to offer protection. There is some omnidirectional light cover which offers protection regardless of the direction of attack, like the craters left behind from heavy artillery. I am not aware of any omnidirectional heavy cover in COH3. If an explosive weapon, like a grenade, is thrown over cover and explodes on this side, the cover offers no protection, because it is not between the damage source and the squad. This is the main difference in cover mechanics compared to COH2, which was based on the position of the unit that launched the damage instead of the explosion itself. Now you know the basic mechanics of cover, so let's dive into the protective benefits of the different types. First, I'm going to start with the absence of cover, also known as open ground. All weapon types do 100% damage to units in open ground. The advantage of open ground is that your squad will be in its default formation, offering a lot of space between models. Being spread out like this makes weapons that have area of effect damage, such as grenades or flamethrowers, less effective, since fewer models will be inside their area. And if they do happen to be inside that area, it is likely they will be further away from the center of the blast, which is good because most AoE weapons do maximum damage in the middle and taper off towards the edge. This means that open ground is often better than being in cover against weapons that do AoE damage. Light cover is usually offered by vegetation, wooden world objects like fences and crates, and craters, both the ones that start on the map and those created by player-controlled artillery over the course of a match. Light cover makes infantry harder to hit and resistant to suppression, but it doesn't offer any protection against AoE weapons like flamethrowers, artillery, or tank fire. So because light cover causes squad members to group closely together, and this makes it easier to get good AoE hits on them, light cover is usually a liability against AoE weapons. Heavy cover is offered by rocks and rubble, walls made from concrete or stone, vehicles and wrecks, as well as player-constructed defenses like sandbags and tank traps. Heavy cover offers the same harder-to-hit boost as light cover, a higher amount of suppression resistance, and a 50% damage reduction. To give you a comprehensive set of numbers for the cover bonuses, I have grouped every weapon in the game into categories. The first is small arms. This covers everything from a pistol up to the 50 cal, with two exceptions. Squad carried light machine guns such as the Bar, Bren, Braider, M1919 and so on. And scoped rifles, like what Tommies get when they are upgraded with the Recce package. Small arms and infantry LMGs have their accuracy halved when shooting at units in both types of cover. But scoped rifles have a special characteristic where they only get a 25% accuracy penalty against units in cover, making scoped rifles a decent cover counter. Heavy cover has a 50% damage reduction against small arms and scoped rifles, but infantry LMGs get a smaller 40% damage reduction, giving LMGs a slight edge versus heavy cover. Light cover halves the amount of suppression a unit receives, and heavy cover reduces it by 90%. Since most suppression comes from small arms fire, let's do a quick detour into how suppression and cover interact. Same as with damage and accuracy, the cover needs to be between you and the source of suppression to offer protection. But only half or more of the models in the squad need to be in cover, and this will give the whole squad suppression resistance. This is the other major difference in how cover functions compared to Code 2. In that game, if one model is out of cover, the whole squad will get suppressed easily. Being in cover also increases a unit's suppression recovery rate. All infantry have a suppression recovery rate of 0.008. This number is multiplied by 2.5 times when a unit is in light cover and 5 times when in heavy cover. When you combine the suppression reduction and the increased recovery rate, this is what helps units in heavy cover avoid getting suppressed by a single machine gun, or slows down the progression from suppressed to pinned when in light cover. But the recovery rate multiplier of light and heavy cover pale in comparison to the bonus from not being shot at by a source of suppression for 10 seconds, which is a 50 times multiplier. Or being inside a garrison, which has a 500 times multiplier. Those are the two scenarios where you see units almost immediately become unsuppressed. Here is a related micro trick. If you have a unit that is suppressed and close to an available garrison, right-click to jump inside. The squad will get a speed bonus, turbo crawling towards the door. Then once inside, they almost immediately recover from suppression thanks to that 500 times recovery multiplier. There is a special mechanic for these three small arms weapon types that removes the defensive bonuses of cover when the enemy is 10 range or closer. This is called the point blank mechanic, and I have a separate in-depth guide on how that works, so be sure to check that one out next. The next weapon category is ballistics. Ballistics covers basically every vehicle mounted gun that is not small arms or artillery. From the generalist mediums that shoot in a straight line, like the Sherman or Panzer IV, to vehicles whose projectile travels a more parabolic flight path, like the Strug D and Brumbeer. Ballistics have the same multipliers against light and heavy cover as small arms, which makes it easy to remember. The difference is the accuracy penalty from cover doesn't really matter to ballistic weapons. This is because their accuracy values are tuned to shoot at vehicles, which are about 20 times larger than infantry. This means the most ballistic hits on infantry come through the scatter system, and there are no cover multipliers for scatter. However, scatter shots collide into the first thing that is in their path. When they are shooting at infantry, this is usually the ground that the infantry are standing on. But scatter shots can also collide into wheeled objects such as sandbags if they are in the way. When they collide into this object, the shell explodes, and if the object is thin enough or the AoE is large enough, the explosion can damage the units behind. This is why it can be better to construct tank traps as cover instead of sandbags. Not only do they have more health and armor, but because they are thicker, the units behind take less AoE damage. The drawbacks of making tank traps is they offer fewer cover positions with erratic spacing, making them tough to use with high model count squads. And it appears there are gaps between them, so a shell may occasionally squeeze through the gap and negate the cover benefits, making sandbags the more reliable option. This shot blocking property of wheeled objects becomes a major problem if your squad is on the wrong side of cover. The blocker prevents scatter shots from overshooting, meaning more hits will land on the infantry. And the infantry will be very close to the center of those explosions, taking massive AoE damage. The parabolic style ballistics are a bit different. Because of their flight path, quite often they will go over the top of cover like sandbags instead of colliding into them. And as you now know, when these shells land on the other side of the cover, this means no bonus for the infantry that is sitting in that cover. So usually I prefer to exit heavy cover against these weapon types and try to spread out instead of staying clumped up and praying that the shots don't go over the top of the cover. Next up are autocannons, which feature as the main gun of all the units here. Autocannons are basically halfway between ballistics and small arms. They travel in a straight line, have a small amount of AoE, and when their shots miss through an accuracy roll, they scatter and collide into blockers. But autocannons also have high accuracy values, comparable to small arms fire, so they rely on getting accuracy hits on infantry to be most effective. Autocannons have the same multipliers against light and heavy cover as normal ballistics. Unlike with the other ballistics, being positioned in light cover can help against autocannons because the harder to hit bonus from light cover is actually relevant. But the light cover needs to be quite thick to absorb the scatter shots and leave the mobs behind untouched. If it is thin light cover that is destroyed very quickly, being in the open is probably the better option. Because autocannon AoEs are so small, they often only hit one model at a time when the unit is fully spread out. Similarly, light cover from craters is a liability against autocannons because there is nothing to block the scatter shots. Some of these autocannon vehicles also have machine guns, but the harder to hit boost against machine guns is not enough to offset the extra damage from the autocannon. And even thin heavy cover provides great benefits against autocannons, because when their scatter shots collide into it, their small AoE has trouble reaching through the cover to do damage. There are a couple of autocannons that have suppression. The same suppression reductions of 50% for light cover and 90% for heavy cover apply to every weapon type that deals suppression. Though in this demonstration, the omnidirectional light cover resulted in a much slower time to suppress and pin, and I don't know for sure why this is the case. The next weapon type is artillery. This includes mortars, light artillery, rocket artillery, and howitzers, as well as most off-map strikes and bombing runs. All artillery have accuracy values of 0, meaning all of their hits come through scatter. so the harder to hit bonuses from cover would be irrelevant. To further reinforce that cover will not make your units harder to hit with artillery, Relic set the accuracy multipliers against cover to 1 as well. Heavy cover does offer a 50% damage reduction against artillery, but since the shells are coming from above, they commonly land and explode on the other side of cover, similar to the parabolic ballistics. So infantry often take more damage when clumped in heavy cover than they would when they are out in the open. The next weapon type is grenades. This includes satchel charges, but not demolition charges. Light cover offers no protection against grenades. Heavy cover reduces grenade damage by half. This is why it is good to throw your grenade slightly behind heavy cover to nullify its defensive bonuses. Grenade launchers are different to grenades. In spite of having accuracy values listed in their stats, grenade launchers cannot roll accuracy hits. They are completely scatter reliant. Grenade launchers get a 33% damage bonus against units in both light and heavy cover, making them a great counter to cover. When I tested this, I could get the bonus damage against crater light cover and thin light cover, but I never got the bonus damage against the unit behind sandbags. The next weapon type is flamethrowers, both handheld and vehicle mounted. Flamethrowers are one of the classic counters to cover in every company of heroes. They do 100% damage to units in light cover and 125% damage to units in heavy cover. I was curious about whether a unit on the wrong side of heavy cover would also take this bonus damage. Unfortunately, while testing this, I found a bug. The unit in the open took the same amount of damage as the two that are in cover. If I used attack round in front of the cover, this could result in more damage to the unit behind cover. But occasionally, flame ticks will miss when using attack round, nullifying the gains you can get from the 25% damage bonus, so I don't think this is worth the extra effort as a micro trick. All of the explosions that we have looked at so far have a circular AoE, but the flamethrower's AoE is more complicated and rectangular. When I give a right-click attack command on this model in the middle of the group, the models in front of him do not get damaged, but the models behind and to the sides do. The charring on the ground is a pretty good representation of the damage area. If I give an attack ground command in roughly the same spot, now the flames do damage on both sides of the attack ground command, roughly doubling the area of damage. The charred area on the ground is once again a good indication of the damage zone. I imagine Relic will do some patching to flamethrowers after these discoveries, but I will give you some practical advice that I imagine will still apply after a fix. When right-click attacking a squad with a flamethrower, you don't have control of which model the flamethrower will target. And if it targets a model on the edge of the squad, the flamethrower's rather narrow AoE might not hit many models. So if a unit is clumped in cover, a better option is giving an attack ground command in the middle of them, and as we just learned, perhaps slightly in front of the cover as well. With this alteration, now every model in the squad is taking damage. Another good option could be to reposition your flamethrower unit so the enemy is lined up going backwards. Now the long AoE of the flamethrower can be maximized, hitting the entire squad. Molotovs are more like grenades. Their initial 10 damage upon landing can get halved by heavy cover if they land on this side. But the 10 damage per second burn they apply does not get any damage bonuses against cover, unlike flamethrowers. The final weapon type are mines. Mines do 100% damage to units in light and heavy cover. A common trick is to plant a mine on the cover your enemy has constructed. Their squad starts to group up when approaching cover, increasing the chance of killing more than one model. And the mine might destroy their cover as well. Snipers are another classic counter to cover. Regardless of the cover type, they will always get a kill with each shot. Those snipers can miss retreating units. Speaking of retreating, I created a mod to test if cover protects retreating units by modifying the gustatory Beretta to have 0 accuracy against light cover. As the squad crosses the light cover, they take 0 damage, confirming that the light cover is protecting the retreating squad. And as soon as they exit the light cover, they start taking damage again. This impacts how you chase retreating squads. Here is a scenario where the enemy is retreating over open ground, but you can see they will soon reach a bunch of light cover. You may want to simply remain in place and avoid the moving accuracy penalty with the aim of doing maximum damage before they reach the light cover. Not chasing is more time efficient and can prevent your squad from overextending for a similar amount of total damage. This tip is best applied to rifle units with higher moving accuracy penalties. Submachine gun units want to keep the enemy close range for as long as possible, so chasing is still better with them. There are a couple unit abilities, like canister rounds on the Greyhound, or the Polston's fragmentation rounds. These perform differently against cover and have unique multipliers. These will generally say so in the ability's description, so try reading. Vehicles and emplacements cannot get the defensive multipliers from cover, but as we learned earlier, wheeled objects can block scatter shots. So if a ballistic shot missed an accuracy roll, cover could block that scatter shot from landing on a vehicle. Now let's tackle garrisons. When inside a garrison, every soldier tries to occupy a firing position, such as a window or a rooftop. And where those models are positioned in the building determines if they will take damage and how much. For example, every model of this squad is currently on this side of the building, attacking the squad outside. If I attack the building with an AoE weapon on the far side, the shot explodes on that side of the building, and the AoE isn't large enough to reach the squad on the other side. Repeating this attack, but now on the side with occupied windows, the soldier closest to the explosion and all of those above him took damage. So pay attention to where the enemy soldiers are located inside the garrison and target that area to get maximum damage. This will be easier to do once Relic fixes unit occlusion on garrison units, making it easier to spot where they are located. There is a special anti-garrison mechanic that certain weapons have enabled, called Damage All in Hold. This means the weapon does its far AoE damage value to all units inside the garrison if they were not in the attack's AoE. Grenades are one of the weapon types with Damage All in Hold enabled, and this makes them good for a demonstration. You can see the red circle indicating the grenade's AoE, and it doesn't touch a single model inside this building. But every model inside took 56 damage, which is what a unit on the outer edge of the same explosion in the open would take as well. Throwing this grenade, however, only ends up damaging 4 models, and this demonstrates that the Damage All in Hold still gets capped by the damage max members per squad limit. Damage All in Hold is enabled on flamethrowers, grenades, and grenade launchers, mortars and light artillery, barrage abilities on the units featured here, and the handful of weapons that feature here. These seem to be a bit more anti-infantry focused than some of their peers. Most of the weapons with damage all in hold enabled have far AoE multipliers that are in the region of 0.2. But flamethrowers are unusual because they do 100% damage everywhere in their AoE. This is why every model in the building dies at the same rate when targeted by a flamethrower, and why flamethrowers are so strong against Garrison's units. If the building doesn't have enough firing positions for every soldier to appear, then the hidden models will also take the damage all in hold amount. If the weapon doesn't have damage all in hold enabled, it is still possible to damage the hidden models. I speculate the hidden models take the amount of damage dealt at the center of the building, so whenever in doubt, especially with the heavier artillery or off maps that mostly do not have damage all in hold enabled, just target the middle of the building. Damage over time weapons like molotovs and phosphorus have damage all in hold on their initial explosions. But the damage over time portion does not, in spite of the animations. The models in the building need to be in that area to take the damage over time, and this has the potential to make these weak against larger buildings, especially for phosphorus, because the vision blocking may make the units inside change their positioning. Now let's look at the full table showing how all three forms of cover match up against every weapon type, and I will highlight where Garrison cover differs from the two we have already looked at. Against small arms and light machine guns, Garrison cover has a slightly worse accuracy modifier than light and heavy cover. Garrison cover is really strong against ballistics, dropping their damage by 75%. This means for conventional medium tanks, the machine guns often do more damage to the units inside than the main gun does. Garrison cover against autocannons is quite different. Autocannons get 100% accuracy against garrisons. In spite of this, garrisons still protect against autocannons far better than heavy cover does, probably due to Garrison cover actually reducing the damage from autocannon accuracy hits, unlike heavy cover, and models being spread out more in garrisons. Garrison cover only reduces artillery damage by 25%. Damage from grenades doesn't get reduced at all by Garrison cover. Grenade launchers and flamethrowers both get a 50% damage boost against garrisons, though due to no model cap on flamethrowers and better far AoE values, flamethrowers are much more effective against garrisons than grenade launchers are, which is probably fair because you have to get closer to garrisons to use them, exposing the flamethrower unit to more damage. And finally, mines get reduced by 50%. Units inside garrisons are also immune to suppression, on top of that massive suppression recovery rate multiplier we looked at earlier. In patch 2.2, Relic introduced a new bonus for units that occupy constructed defenses. This applies to bunkers, fighting nests, fighting positions, and hardpoints. But you cannot get inside the British or Afrika Korps HMG nests. Throwing a gammon bomb at the edge of the bunker's footprint, it damages all on hold as expected, and they only took 28 damage instead of 56, demonstrating this is indeed Garrison cover with an extra 50% reduction. Here are a couple more cover-related micro tips. When capturing, sometimes you can send the squad partially into nearby cover outside of the capture circle. Depending on the squad's formation and the cover, this may work easily, like with these falchion piles. But if not, right-click the unit into cover, then hit stop before they exit the circle. Even though the cover shield doesn't show up for the squad, If I delete the other models, you can see that this one is in cover. Now you have a model or two protected by cover from the direction the enemy is most likely to attack from, while the squad is still capturing. This can give you a durability boost at the start of a fight, while still gaining map control. If a unit is bunched in cover and you want them to spread out as quickly as possible, such as to dodge a grenade, notice this. When the cursor is about 5 range back from the cover, the formation is still just as bunched up as they were in cover, making it more likely that multiple models get hit by AoE damage. Moving the cursor a bit further, now the squad will spread out into its normal formation. So try to click about 10 range away when you want to spread out as quickly as possible. Different squad formations exit cover in different orders, so this will work better with some squads compared to others. If you try to click far away to exit cover, the squad doesn't start spreading out until they are about 20 range away from the cover, and even after that, it is a gradual process. So far away clicks are bad for spreading out. Also, try to give the move order onto open ground. If the move order is onto another piece of cover, the squad can remain bunched up. Finishing up, I want to mention the problem with cover in COH3. Throughout this video, you will have heard many times that units are better spread out in the open instead of being in cover. While this is usually possible in 1v1, in team games, once the late game hits, the greater density of artillery fire covers most of the playfield in light cover craters, making spreading out difficult to achieve. Alongside this, heavy cover has been devalued against so many more weapon types compared to COH2, due to the mechanic change from direction of attacker to the direction of the explosion. I feel this has been a major contributing factor towards more blobbing in COH3, because sitting in heavy cover late game is often a liability instead of a bonus. Maybe Relic has been trying to rectify this recently with the buffs to putting units in constructed defenses, but this largely only affects Wehrmacht, who have two good options. USF's fighting position is expensive for how flimsy it is, and Brits don't have a single option. So at the moment, one of the big selling points for Company of Heroes, the cover system, plummets in relevance beyond the 20-minute mark in the most popular game mode, 4v4. And I think that is a shame, but I don't really play 4v4, so if you do, let me know what you think about cover in the comments below. This guide took well over a month to produce, so if you think I deserve more than about $20 of ad revenue for my efforts, I hope you consider coming on board as a Patreon backer, like all of these legends.